Hi, I'm Lisa M. Hansberger. I'm from Jamaica and I work at a university in Japan. I've been in the language and linguistics field for 18 years this year, teaching in it for over a decade. I've taught at universities in my home country, at a high school in France, and I've taught at every level in Japan from kindergarten to university. Most of my experience in Japan actually lies between the high school and the university levels. I came to Japan in 2012, and since I came, I was fortunate enough to have had what I call Techni-capable classrooms. Classrooms where technology was not only present, but I was also allowed to use it. In most cases, I was even encouraged to do so. At the high school where I taught for almost 5 years, I was able to use technology in the classroom. My students' English ability ranged from a beginner, basic beginner, to low intermediate. And for the most part, their motivation was on the lower side. And so I had to be really creative in the kinds of lessons and activities and worksheets and presentations that I created. So over the years, I was able to really hone my creative presentation design skills, and I've learned a lot along the way, some of which I'll be sharing with you today. My presentation skills initially began in college, in university, in grad school, thanks to the feedback I'd gotten from my peers and professors at university. And then over the years, with all the lessons and activities I created for my students, I learned a few tips and tricks and different ways of doing things that end with a very creative result. And I often get asked about my creation skills, and so I've been making a lot of presentations of late about making presentations. And today I'm going to be sharing with you creative uses of PowerPoint and Keynote in the Techni-capable EFL classroom. I'll be using examples from some of the lessons that I have created, and I'll also be showing you a few creative ways that you can use the different features available in PowerPoint, Microsoft PowerPoint, and Apple Keynote. This presentation was initially given during a live Zoom presentation for KOTESOL National, the KOTESOL National conference that was held online. And during my presentation, a few of my audience members had a bit of difficulty with their internet connectivity, and so I was asked if I could make this presentation available online. I've tried as much as possible to incorporate some of the questions that I was asked during the presentation in this presentation. And just so you know, the presentation software that I have used for this presentation is Apple Keynote. And for the video element, what you're seeing of me right now, I recorded it using Photo Booth, and I stitched it all together in iMovie. So just 3 software that I used for making this happen. I hope you'll enjoy this presentation. Often, when we use presentation software, we tend to start by writing our thoughts out on the slides. We'll write most of what we want to say, what we want our audience to remember, and the important information that we want our audience to take away from the presentation. As a result, our slides become a bit text heavy, which is useful for speakers who rely on them to remember what they want to say. But for the audience, it can be a bit taxing to read slide after slide of text. We fall into the trap of making our presentations presenter-centered, and in the EFL classroom, this can be especially challenging, as we risk losing student interest. If we were to utilize the array of multimodal features available to us, however, features like text, images, video, shapes, sound, animation, and more, we would be able to create effective presentations that communicate our ideas and instructions more clearly and concisely. We'd be able to move away from presenter-centered presentations and towards more audience-centered ones. In this presentation, we will focus on three multimodal features: images, shapes, and animation. Images are a powerful illustrative tool, and they're also great for adding a decorative element to slides. They can be photographs, clip art, maps, screenshots, textbook images, and so on. We can use images in self-introductions, as a part of classroom instruction, for homework explanation, to do interactive activities or Q&As, as an accompaniment to listening activities.
Imagine you're on a boat sailing on the sea when you crash into a rock and start to sink. You need to grab supplies and take them with you in the life raft. But you can't take everything. You must choose 5 items. Which 5 items will you take? Write a sentence with your decision and justify each choice using the relative clause.
We can use images for pop culture references and more. At our most complex, we can reimagine famous scenes. And at our simplest, we can use images as is. I often recommend using high-resolution images for presentations. High resolution means that the images have a lot of pixels, the dots that make up an image. So they're very crisp when enlarged on a screen. It's also better to have a high-resolution image and shrink it down than it is to have a low-resolution image and blow it up. The latter will result in fuzzy, pixelated images, meaning we can see the tiny dots that make up the image. The only drawback to using high-resolution images is that they have a larger file size. So if space on your computer is an issue, go with what works. Also, be mindful of images like this, with the watermarks over them, as the lines can really detract from the image. The majority of the high-resolution photographs that I've used in this presentation came from this website, pexels.com. They have a wide array of stock photos and videos that are free for use. They're really gorgeous, and I love using this website. Another great resource is Google Images. To find high-resolution images via a Google image search, first search for the image, click on Tools, Size, Large, and voila! For images like this, where the background of the image blocks out the slide design or the background image, try searching for an image with a transparent background instead. You can use the Google Images Tools option again, but this time you're going to search by color, then transparency. Well, color. You can also avoid the tools filter entirely by just adding PNG to your search bar. This, for instance, was entered as porcupine PNG. You can usually tell that an image has a transparent background when, after you've clicked on it to view it, this gray and white checkered background shows up. A question I was asked during the presentation was, how can I identify images with an invisible background? So let's take a look at that using this search, Rabbit PNG. I've already filtered my search so that I can only find the high resolution images. We're going to take a look at 4 images. 2 will have white backgrounds from what we can see just from the search. 1 will have a black background and another will have a checkered background. So first, click on the image. While the image is loading, it will look a little out of focus and you'll be able to see the loading bar. Once it finishes loading, you will see a nice high resolution image, or at least you should. And if the gray and white checkered background shows up, like in this image, then that is how we will know that this is an image with a transparent background. Next, let's look at this image that has a black background. Once it has loaded, we see that gray and white checkered background appear. And when we copy the image onto our slides, we can see that this image has a transparent background. Now, if you're really keen-eyed, you'll notice that there are parts of the rabbit that are a little see-through. So for an image like this, I personally would use it only if it's really small or not at all. Of course, it depends on you. If that is not so aesthetically pleasing for you, then of course go with an image that looks a lot better. For instance, the image on the left looks a lot nicer. It doesn't have any kind of weird see-through areas. But of course, in the grand scheme of things, it's not always that important. It just depends on your taste. Now let's go back to our search. Next is this rabbit. Now, from the Google Images search, we can see that this image already had a gray and white checkered background. When it loads with a gray and white checkered background. And when we copy it onto our slides, copy and paste. So when we put it on our slides, that same gray and white checkered background shows up. This is not an image with a transparent background. And there are many images like this that will show up as having a transparent background, but they really do not. If you see the gray and white checkered background before you click on the image, that image will not have a transparent background. It will have a background that is a gray and white checkered background. Let's look at our final image. Another rabbit with a white background. However, when it loads with the white background. And when we copy it to our slide, the white background also copies over. So the key here is ensuring that the gray and white checkered background shows up in our images after we click on them. For images like this that have a solid background, PowerPoint and Keynote have a feature that allows you to remove the background of the images. It tends to work best with a solid background. For instance, as in the case of this sunflower, it removes it pretty well. But this feature tends to not work as well on images with a busy background or with colors that are very similar. At my university, we, like so many of you, have taken our classes online this semester. We're doing asynchronous lessons where we record videos and where we create assignments. So our students watch the videos and then they complete and submit the assignments. A few of us, like myself, have decided to create complementary presentations to go with our videos. I created this slide to explain to my students what the individual graded components of their course are. They would do assignments based on textbook activities, speaking activities, vocabulary activities, and e-learning, online learning exercises. At the end, they would have a final exam administered by the English section. The slide looks pretty enough. It's colorful and simplistic. However, while creating this presentation, I started to realize that I was falling into the trap of making my presentation presenter-centered. I was using just text, and I was designing the slides based on what I wanted to tell my students, and not based on what was the easiest way for me to communicate that to them. So I stopped, and I thought about my students and how I could make my presentation centered around them. My mantra when it comes to making presentations has always been, don't say what you mean, show what you mean. So I could show them images of the textbook and the vocabulary word book. I could show them a snapshot of the e-learning website. I could show them photographs that illustrate speaking and someone taking an exam. And if I'm being fancy, I could pair these images with the text to get this. In this class, you will be doing textbook activities, speaking activities, vocabulary activities, and e-learning activities. At the end, you will have an achievement test. For this slide, I could use the same images to once again visually represent what each assignment refers to. It's clean, it's simple, and it's easy to understand. Next, let's look at shapes. PowerPoint and Keynote have a variety of shapes that we can incorporate in our presentations. They have squares and rectangles, triangles, circles and ovals, arrows, lines, callouts, stars, ticks, restriction symbol, etc., etc. We can use arrows to point things out in an image. We can use squares and rectangles to highlight important information, or to help text pop over images. For this one, I like to tweak the transparency a little so that the background peeks through. We can use shapes to express that something is forbidden and to create conversations. We can use lines to create custom tables or charts and point out and explain important information. We can express that something is incorrect or correct. One aspect of shapes that some of us may not be aware of is that we can edit an image to have a particular shape. And we can use these changes in a lot of different ways. This is called cropping, or if you're using Keynote, masking. So going back to my presentation, we're going to take what we just learned and take it up another level, starting with this slide. Here, I can use lines to point out and explain the information and to visually delineate the in-class and out-of-class sections. For activities in class, that's 80%, and one exam at the end, that's 20% of their grade. As for this slide, let's learn how to create something like this. And again, no, we're not recreating in sync. We're going to use this as an inspiration to create a vertical collage. Vertical collages are really popular for movies, album covers, anime, and more. What we'll notice about vertical collages is that all the images are of the same length and of roughly the same width. So all we have to do is divide our slide width into more or less equal sections. We have 4 images. So we're going to take our images, enlarge them, crop them to the correct width, and create an eye-catching vertical collage. Next, let's put small rectangles over each image and tweak that transparency just a little. Then add corresponding text and voila! In my presentation that I made for my students, I decided to show the assignments and percentage per activity using the same idea, but with circles. And I added a little razzle-dazzle with matching colored outlines to give it more of a 70s pop culture feel. For our final section, let's look at animation. Keynote and PowerPoint have a range of entrance, emphasis, and exit animation. Some sober, and others quite exciting. I have found that the exciting animation tends to work well with younger audiences. We can also use it to create intuitive animation, for instance, balls that bounce, bats that swing. Sober animation, on the other hand, tends to feel more appropriate with mature audiences. Just a nice, simple movement. Let's look at 5 animation types that we can find in both PowerPoint and Keynote. They are Appear, Dissolve, Iris, Move In, and Wipe. You've seen them throughout this very presentation as I've used them a lot. Now, animations are not necessary to make a presentation great, and how we use them can either add to or detract from our presentations. For instance, for text, the really exciting animation tends to not work as well. It can be a little overwhelming. Now, one cool animation feature that we will explore is timing. Timing determines when animations play, and there are 3 timing features. The first is on click, meaning items only animate when we click the mouse. The second is after previous, meaning the second item animates automatically after the preceding animation. The third is with previous, meaning the second item animates automatically with the preceding animation. One of my favorite things to do with this last timing feature is to have objects animate simultaneously, but in opposite directions. This creates a really nice effect. This is also how I create my signature table animation. I have lines that wipe with previous, but in opposite directions, altogether creating a very nice effect. Now let's try the same animation style with our vertical images using Move In. And we want to make sure that the synchronized movement is vertical, that is top down and bottom up. But we're going to change the direction of every other image to get this. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something new and interesting today, and that you will be able to take some of what you've learned into your EFL classes. Thank you so much, KOTESOL National, for having had me be a part of your conference this year. I really had a great experience, and I really must commend everyone on the committee for a fantastic job in bringing this conference online. To close, I'm going to show you how I created my slides in the end for my lesson, and I'll show you a clip from the video that I made for my students with the slides that I've shown you in this presentation. All right, goodbye. Hi, my name is Lisa Hunsberger. Please call me Lisa. I'm from Jamaica, in the Caribbean. It's next to North America and South America. Jamaica is famous for its beautiful beaches, waterfalls, fun activities, and more. Usain Bolt is from Jamaica, like me. Do you know Usain Bolt? He is a very fast runner. Welcome to Listening and Speaking. Because of the dangerous coronavirus, we will not have classes at school. Instead, we will do our classes online. In this class, we will do homework from the textbook, Communication Spotlight. We will do speaking homework. We will do vocabulary homework using the KSU word book. And we will do e-learning. At the end of the semester, you will have an achievement test. Your textbook homework, speaking homework, vocabulary homework, and e-learning are all 80% of your grade. The achievement test is 20% of your grade. You will do 4 graded activities for this class. You will do 10 activities from your textbook, 10 textbook homework, 10 speaking homework, 10 vocabulary homework, and you will do e-learning activities. Each graded activity is 20% of your grade. You will use Spotlight